Good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon session of the public hearing and public meeting of October 17th, 2023. We will resume this afternoon's public hearing with item number 8, and I will turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through our agenda items.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. We'll begin with public hearing item number 8, LPC 24-01927, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the borough of Manhattan, block 499, lot 36, 107 Spring Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a frame building built prior to 1808. The application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of painted wall signs.
Hello, commissioners and landmark staff. It's nice to see you all again. I missed seeing you the last time I was on a hearing, which was August, when I finally got COVID and couldn't be in here in person. My name is Jackie Pudivallen, preservation consultant on the project. I'm here today with Angel Sime and Jacqueline Raggiola of Overall Murals. Ms. Raggiola would like to make a short statement before I start the presentation.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Regolia. You did good, Jackie. Don't worry. I'm used to it. Okay. Hi, I'm the Director of Real Estate at Overall Murals. And before we begin with the rest of our presentation, I'd like to give a little additional background on Overall Murals and why we feel so strongly about continuing the tradition of hand-painted advertising on 107 Spring Street. This particular building, 107 Spring Street,
Sorry, everybody.
There we go. Thanks. This particular building, 107 Spring Street, used to be home to a sign company in the early 20th century. The ability to bring back some of the historical use of this building into the present is just one reason why we do what we do. We are a family-owned and independently operated hand paint sign company. Our mission is to continue to uphold the age-old craft and tradition of hand-painted advertising using the same materials and techniques that have been used in New York for over 100 years. Our team of in-house artisans and have been hand-painting signs for local businesses and advertising murals on Soho facades since 2007. And we view our work as a continuation of the neighborhood's artistic and commercial heritage, an integral part of the backdrop of Manhattan that can still be seen in ghost signs. Not only do we maintain history, but we also address present issues by investing in weekly maintenance checks to keep our murals and properties clear of graffiti, garbage, and wheat pastes. Our female-led and run real estate team is a rarity in this business. We treat each location with a personalized focus and personal touch. Being part of a location with a being part of Soho's history is something we deeply value, and we're committed to further building that legacy. Thank you for having us here today. I'm also here, Angel is one of the co-owners of the business.
Sorry, I'm trying to go back to the previous slide. Okay. So thank you, Jacqueline. This is Jackie Pudivallen again for the record. 107 Spring Street stands on the northwest corner of Spring and Mercer Streets in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. The proposal before you today is for a painted wall sign master plan at the Mercer Street elevation on the first floor. Here's the existing condition of the wall. You'll note that the stones at the stone sill below the painted portion of the wall, there's a lot of remnants of graffiti. This is because the wall is often tagged with graffiti, usually including messages of and symbols of hate. Overall Murals, I just want to point out, for about 2 years now, has been maintaining this wall and making sure that those messages get painted out. On the left is the earliest photo I could find for this building from 1932. In the middle is the building from 1934, and on the right is the building in the 1940s. You'll note that in these photos, it was typical in this former manufacturing district that there was a lot of commercial signage on the building and on the tall loft building adjacent. So it's really a historic condition in this instance to see this building with a large painted sign on it, while at the same time being able to see the signage on the lot line wall behind it. And there's a serendipity here in that the building in the early 20th century was home to the Manhattan Sign Company. Here's the building at designation in 1973 with the remnants of a sign on Mercer Street at the first floor and a large sign on Spring Street. As commissioners are aware, there have been a lot of painted wall sign master plans approved for this historic district, including 3 on Spring Street. The signs previously approved on Spring Street are at 109 Spring, the neighboring building. You can see clearly here. 134 Spring, which is somewhat visible about a block and a half away to the west. And third, at 145 Spring Street, cannot be seen in conjunction with 107 Spring. Here's another example, sample view of the proposed sign from across the intersection. As seen in the historic photos of 107 Spring, abundant signage was a feature of this historic district in the early 20th century. Here are additional low-scale buildings at corners, also with prominent signage and with painted wall signs on the adjacent taller buildings. And additional historic photos showing that the same specifically on Spring Street. And one more building on Spring Street. This is 180 Spring, which in the showing the 1930s and today. You'll note it still has a painted mural on the ground floor. And here are just a few examples of painted signs in nearby historic districts. These are left to right, the Panchito sign at 11 Minetta Lane, the mural at 64 McDougal, and the Little Ruby sign approved at in 2022 at 225 West 4th Street. Here's a rendering that gives you the view of what it would look like if you were walking in front of this building on the sidewalk, experiencing the sign. And here's the proposed sign, which would be 7 foot 6 inches high and 22 feet 8 inches wide. The placement of the sign is really dictated by the proportions of this lower part of the building and trying to align it with at least one of the windows above. The proposed master plan criteria is consistent with LPC approvals of recent years, including a 2-inch border, no regulation of content, a term of 10 years, and a sign that takes up less than 20% of the visible portion of the lot line wall. I'm sorry, the wall. It's not a lot line in this case. The total sign area would be 10.3% of the visible wall. The square feet of the visible wall is 1,655. The square feet of the proposed sign is 171. And here's just a couple more examples to show you the rendered views. And that is our presentation, and we look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right. Yes, Commissioner Goldblum.
Are there other approved signs that have master plans on the first floor?
I don't have knowledge of that. I would ask staff if they know.
Yeah, I think typically they're on lot line facades, not street facing facades. I mean, I think there is the Frosty Myers mural, which is on a lot line facade, but lower, right? I mean, the signs we approved below the mural.
That's right.
Yeah,
They're lower. They're
installation. Yeah. But again, it was low. The signs we approved were low, but they were still on a lot line facade.
I can think of a Sephora sign it's off of 9th Avenue in Gansevoort Market Historic District, but that's above the first floor. It's like extending from the second to third floors on the main facade facing on I guess that's Little West 12th Street. They painted that, they would know.
All right.
So besides lining up with one window, how did you figure out the size of the sign?
I think I should have someone from overall answer that question. Come on.
Hi, I'm Angel Samai. I'm one of the owners of Overall. My husband and I own the company together, and we started in 2010. So, when we look at signage, we've been working in signage for a long time. My husband's also a street artist. So, from Russia, and we look at everything from an aesthetic view. I know you look at things from a historic view, but when we render and mock up where we put signage, we think of how it will look from a distance, up close, its visibility. For this, we looked at the lighting that's there, the windows, and creating something that looks balanced on the facade. So, there are some other ideas of maybe going a little bit taller in between the lighting that seemed to not look as nice when we were mocking it up. So that's how we came up with the size and the orientation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Chu.
Not for the applicant, more for us. Is there any way to distinguish? I mean, signage can serve many purposes, right? There's signage that identifies the identity of the store that's there, and then there's signage that is advertising, which is this. So very different, right? And a mural. And a mural is different as well. Okay.
So I just think when we talk about these master plans, they're exclusively, I think pretty much exclusively for third-party advertising. They're not accessory business signs. They're signs that are intended to advertise, products that have nothing to do with the building, the stores that are in the building. They're anticipated they will turn over, yeah. And so, yeah. And I think just to sort of also say, just follow up what Sarah said, I can't recall of any sign that's like a third party advertising sign like this that's on the first floor, other than the frosting was part of a judicial settlement. Almost all of them have been up on secondary facades above.
Yeah, not on the first floor or street facing facade. All right. Other questions? Okay, let's move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, not noting that there is no one present to speak in this item. I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a few hands raised for this item. And first, we will be hearing from John Graham from the Victorian Society of New York. So John Graham, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society of New York. We can hardly imagine anything less appropriate than an enormous billboard-sized advertising sign on the first floor of a building over 200 years old. This type of sign is not only inappropriate to the building, altered though it is, but to the district. We acknowledge that this building was once covered with signs, but those signs were specific to the building's occupant, a sign shop. Also, the sign's wood frames and graphic character were very different from the photorealistic signs typical today and shown as examples by the applicant. If the Commission were willing to regulate the graphic quality of signs, as opposed to their content, it might be possible to find signs to be appropriate on this building, but the combination of the size, location, and graphic quality of the signs that would be installed pursuant to this master plan make the proposal highly inappropriate. Most people looking at the images on pages 1, 6, and 7 of the presentation would say this is what historic district designation is intended to prevent. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Pete Davies. So Pete Davies, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Yes, hi. My name is Pete Davies. I'm a longtime resident of Soho in close proximity to 107 Spring Street. I urge you to deny this application, which will allow for overbearing and unprecedented advertising signage within the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I point you to the Community Board 2 resolution from March 2022 that recommends denial of this signage plan. The CB's points in opposition warrant your attention. This proposal is for a single massive advertising sign at 107 Spring, taking over nearly the entire ground floor facade. The sign will tower over the sidewalk and was without precedent in the district. The so-called Spring Street context on page 10 shows built with murals at 180 Spring, many blocks away, and not within the historic Soho cast iron district. The applicant's placement of expansive imagery at eye level will alter the visual composition of the Mercer Street facade and overwhelm this modest building. It also overpowers the entire intersection of Mercer and Spring, which is shared with the renowned Donald Judd Living Workspace directly across Mercer Street. Under this plan, the historic district buildings become secondary to the advertising signage. Further, current conditions show the mismatched non-historic lighting fixtures that were installed without LPC permits and serve to illuminate an illegal advertising sign that was put up on this wall without LPC approval. Apparently, the applicant is hoping the commissioners will ignore those inappropriate fixtures as they are not even mentioned in their plans, yet seemingly under their proposal will remain in place. The 107 Spring Street Master Plan for painted wall signs before you today should be rejected. The proposal is distracting and inappropriate. This mega signage does nothing to enhance this building or our beautiful Soho cast iron historic district. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC supports signage here, but not at this size and placement. Because this sign is proposed at the ground floor level, HDC believes that a series of smaller signs would be more appropriate than one large sign. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Laura T. So Laura T., I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. I take it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I walked by the building last week with a friend, and I hadn't been down the block for a while. And I looked and I said, "Oh, look, the sign is gone. We can still see the building again. Isn't it wonderful?" The absence of the cacophony of advertising, of third-party advertising on that wall really adds to the streetscape and the sense of what Soho is and was. It's inappropriately sized. The colors that are used are inappropriate. It just should not be there. And I'm saying this as the person who back in the 1990s proposed to the community board that all signage in Soho be painted and no longer on fabric. And I was so pleased and proud that the LPC picked up that idea, that I'm sure other people thought of it too, but I'm the one who suggested and made it through to you guys. I think this is a travesty of that idea. And I just urge you to deny. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your testimony. Okay. I do not see any further hands raised. However, I was given a letter of speaker sign in person. So if Susan Numeroff is here. Yes, I will.
My name is Susan Numeroff. I am a resident of Soho since 1988. There's been major changes in the neighborhood, as we all know. As much as I'm opposed to advertising in our neighborhood, I am really opposed to the graffiti that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis on our buildings. We have a building at 81 Wooster and 393 West Broadway. And I will say that some of the hand-painted signs are done very well and can also help with owners of buildings dealing with random graffiti, which has to constantly be taken off of the buildings, which then creates problems with the integrity of the brick of the building. And it goes on and on and on. And I don't think we're ever going to say that graffiti is an art form as we see it in today's day and age. It is not what it was in the 70s, the 80s, or the 90s. So I hope that you will consider something of that, whether it's a different size, but that you will consider that an advertisement done hand-painted in the neighborhood would be appropriate, and it would deter from the graffiti that we are dealing with today. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I do not see any further hands raised in the attendees list. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends denial of the sign as it's far too large for the building with its position at street level, that a smaller sign or multiple small signs be permitted in the designated space, and that the lighting fixtures be eliminated or replaced with matching fixtures appropriate to the building. We also received written testimony from the Soho Alliance, as well as 8 individuals, 3 of which recommend approval and 5 recommend denial. And with that, I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. All right. I'd like to ask the applicant if you'd like to respond to the comments we've heard.
Yes, thank you, Chair Carroll. As I explained before, and I understand this is not exactly Commissioner's purview, but this is an expansive empty wall that often gets tagged. It often gets graffitied. With a signage company maintaining the wall, it will be kept clear of graffiti and be kept in a condition consistent with other areas of this historic district. As I showed in historic photos, there is precedent within this district for large painted signs, even at the ground floor or lower floors of buildings. And since the commission doesn't regulate content of signage anymore, I would say that's not exactly relevant to the fact that this building had, specifically a sign manufacturer in it advertising itself. There were other examples I showed where there were other signs on other buildings with different types of businesses inside, which also had a proliferation of signs. Bring it back there. And I think Angel Samay would like to respond as well. Oh, before I turn it over to her, I wanted to mention the light fixtures that just before the hearing came to our attention, that those may not have been permitted. That's not an issue specific to, the sign company to deal with, but they would be happy to take that on with the landlord and discuss a solution there.
I just wanted to say that if there are recommendations for modifications to the size, we are open to that. And we would be happy to discuss with the staff regarding it.
Okay, thank you. And just another question. Does this sign conform with the zoning resolution for signage?
We did apply to the and received approval for it already. And so this would likely be the last off-premise sign in Soho cast iron, potentially.
All right, commissioners, any other final questions? All right, let's make a motion to close the hearing and begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Thank you. And Vice Chair Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed, and we'll have our discussion about this sign. And as you know, commissioners, we have had a long history, sort of a standing policy with respect to painted wall signs on lot line facades, where we establish certain parameters. And those have since been codified in rules that you all recently adopted. This does not conform to those rules because it is a street facing facade at ground level. And but otherwise, I think the intent is to, in terms of the percentage of the facade and the border and the content, I think they are hoping to align with the other aspects of the rule. So we'll have our discussion now. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Okay. I don't think it's appropriate. I think it's a totally different animal than the side party wall on brick elevated sign. Now, that said, I think there's plenty of precedent for text tattooed over the face of buildings as a historical condition. But even taking the broadest view of those precedents, this does not comport with those either. Those were generally for businesses that were in the building. They were purely text-based, as far as I can tell, I recall anyway. And they were generally confined to kind of spandrels or kind of confined, discrete elements, even if there were lots of them. I think that this is a different animal, and yeah, I have one of these on my block at work, and we call it a billboard. So I think that this, I think that they could have a rectangular, vertically oriented sign that was perhaps, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet wide by the height here, whatever that is, 7 feet high. I think something like that could be okay, perhaps as a painted sign, perhaps as a plaque mounted to the wall. I think that the argument about graffiti is, I mean, I'm not a social scientist or a historian of graffiti, but I've seen plenty of painted or billboard wall signs that get graffitied all the time. I don't think it's necessarily a deterrent. It may change the nature of the graffiti, but I don't think it's an excuse for avoiding graffiti. Not that that's really within our purview anyway. I think there are plenty of solutions they could come back with that would be perhaps more graffiti resistant. I don't think this is a way to obtain that. So I don't think I could vote for it as it is.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, as some will know, I'm an advocate in general of wall signs, but I completely agree that this one doesn't fit the definition of what we normally see as a wall sign. In placement, being on the first floor, in proportion, it's way out of proportion for the building there. Its prominence in the streetscape. And as Michael was just discussing, also its purpose, which if it were to be on a ground floor, it would normally have connected very much with the purpose of the building. And also, I agree, this should not be a solution for graffiti. Maybe they could propose a mural, an art project or something. If it were an art project and it was a permanent, semi-permanent thing, that might be something that could be appropriate. But this is basically advertising, and we would look at it as advertising, and it would be very minor compared to this. We wouldn't permit anything like this for advertising. And even this nice little building, if you put let's say a sign up higher on the second floor, we occasionally permit, there's not much space there. We occasionally permit things on lot line sides that are where there are windows. But I think this would it would look really disruptive of the side of the building, even to have a sign there. So I'm definitely could not approve this in any way. And I think there are definitely other solutions. If their primary problem is graffiti, present something different to us. As I said, a large thing that was an attractive mural might be possible.
Yeah. That is actually something that we have approved on the ground floor of street facing facades. Commissioner Halford Smith.
Yes, I agree with the previous comments. I think that the scale and the location of the ground floors is not appropriate. Perhaps, I love the idea of a mural, but if they're looking for advertising revenue, then perhaps something smaller could be done that we might find appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Master.
I agree with the other commissioners. I think that the size of it just overwhelms the building. And so I think we have to look at other solutions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Chu.
Yes, I'm in agreement with my fellow commissioners, and I do think that if you look at another approach, use the existing historic building architecture as your key and try to work with it in some way. And I think that would feel more responsive to the building that's being preserved here. I can see through time that the street level corner effect, because it's a corner building, which is unique, has lost its presence over the years, and it's gotten flattened and less noticeable. And I feel like this completely rearranges the focus of the historic design of this structure. That's it.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, I agree. It is a dominant. It's a dominant statement on this tiny building. I personally think it would be helpful for us to not consider a sign at the ground floor of a building like this unless it relates to the building itself. I don't think this should be an opportunity to generate revenue for whoever. I guess it's the owner of the building. And I just don't think we should set this precedent.
Vice Chair Bland.
I'm an outlier. I know that everybody romanticizes those historic pictures with all the signs. I don't romanticize those. Some signs, okay, but I think they detract from my appreciation of the ability to appreciate the architecture, let's say. I also note that in those pictures, you usually see thousands of overhead wires going everywhere. I don't miss those either. So I don't know that romanticizing something that's been in the past is necessarily something that we need to continue. Again, I'm not against all signs, but I certainly am against this advertising sign at this place at this moment. Even though I'm generally not in love with signs, I have voted occasionally for them, but not this one. It's too large, and it's somehow inappropriate on this little building.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was out of the room because of I had to do a detour because of the famous court case. I think you know what I'm referring to. So I had to do a long walk around the block.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for making it. Commissioner Ginsburg.
Okay, I in general agree, but I'm going to talk about what I know versus what I'm not sure about. So what I know is this sign, it's a billboard at the ground floor, and it's just inappropriate. I think it is possible that smaller sign or signs could be appropriate if we look at the historic photos, although I realize they're typically advertising for that building store. They're all over the place, but the scale is different. Yeah. So I don't know if the applicant comes back with a smaller sign or signs, what we would consider appropriate, but I do know that, but I think there's something we could consider appropriate. But I do know that this is not appropriate.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for your thoughtful comments. And so I think we've heard that there is no support for the proposed sign as proposed today. There is some openness to looking at another approach here. And so we'll take no action so that you can come back after thinking about it a little bit. I think we don't have very direct guidance that we can turn it over to the staff. So we'll ask you to think about it and think about kind of the issues of historic precedent, working with the architecture and scale and size relative to the building. Those are all themes that came up in our comments, and we will have you back when you're ready. Okay. Thank you.
Right, we'll now move to public hearing item number 9, LPC 24-00588, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 751, lot 76, 296 9th Avenue, the Church of the Holy Apostles, individual landmark. This is a church building designed by Menard Lefevre and built in 1846 to 48, with an eastern extension built in 1853 to 1854, and transepts designed by Charles Babcock of Richard Upjohn and Son and built in 1858, as well as an attached parish mission house and connector block built in 1866 to 67. The application is to replace windows, modify window and door openings, install barrier-free access ramps, construct a vestibule, modify roof lines, construct an elevator bulkhead, and install mechanical equipment.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Juan Matisse from Matisse Architecture and Design.
And Hilda Cohen from Matisse Architecture and Design.
We're here on behalf of the Church of the Holy Apostles, and they operate a food pantry in a fantastic community facility located at West 28th Street and 9th Avenue.
Please click on your screen and then you can advance the slides using the arrow keys after you click on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you. As you can see here is an image of the church as viewed from at the corner of West 28th and 9th. The building on the top right-hand side is a floor plan that shows you its location in close by context. And the complex for the site is composed of the church, which is the white shape. There is a mission house building, which is the red rectangular building that is located just to the south of it. The left photograph is a current image of the building, and the black and white photograph is a historic image of the church and the steeple. The church is a pivotal location of community activism and was built in 1844. It supported immigrants who worked on the Hudson River waterfront and later became a refuge for folks in the neighborhood and beyond. The church buildings are believed to have been even a facility for the Underground Railroad and became a meeting place during the Stonewall gay rights movement later in the 60s. Our work is to propose an addition that would identify a new entry, which we are going to see in the following slides. But the key points that we're hoping to make today on behalf of the Church of the Holy Apostles is to identify the program goals that drove this project. The facility is in need of dire improvements as far as ADA compliance. You can see the photograph from the street as viewed from 9th Avenue, and then a very nearby close-up photograph in the space that we identify on the floor plan as Area B, which is an open space between the church, which is in orange, and the mission house, which is the rectangular sort of reddish volume that's to the south of the church. The photograph on the top right would show the ramp that's currently used to enter the mission house, which is that red door that you see there. The facility is serving a huge amount of efforts to distribute food and also prepare food that is then the community is open to using on a daily basis. Today, the access to the church for most of the functions takes place by walking between the sort of barriers that you see on the left of the photograph, making that sort of hairpin turn and going into that small wooden door that Hilda is showing here on the presentation. So providing ADA compliance to the facility, both the church and the mission house as the source of the project, But eventually, of course, they would look at a capital improvement such as this and say, what else can we do to take advantage of the fact that we're going to undergo a construction project? And so the facility is provided with a new elevator inside of the mission house that allows visitors and staff to go to up to the second and third floors and restore some of the exterior of the building, which we're going to see on the following slides, replace windows, make sustainability improvements and improved energy efficiency for the mission house, which is primarily where the work is going to take place. But we also see an opportunity to provide the church and the mission house with a new dignified entry point, as opposed to what you notice in the previous photograph, which is sort of a sort of alleyway of spaces and sort of odd architectural character. Hilda's going to walk us through a few of the other slides, but as you can see here, the mission house and the church are on this sort of open site bordered by green areas and housing buildings that are located in Chelsea.
Right. So the photograph on the left and much of the gray area, that is Penn South. It's all private areas. And it's completely surrounded by Penn South and the tall buildings. This sheet shows the different elevations of the mission. A lot of the issues that we have with some of the openings and the windows, there's grates, there's AC, through window AC units, and there's a variation of what has happened all across the exterior. These show some of the photos of the existing conditions, especially the bottom three, that we are, is part of our program to address the ever-present dumpsters, which greets you as you walk into the church or walks into the food pantry, the non-ADA compliant ramp, which is used for both the people and the pallets and the food products, which is an enormous undertaking. And that HVAC, which you can see here above the red door, it's overwhelming and it's in the areaway, which is one of the items that we are going to address. So the existing site, again, the church is the sort of beige, the mission house is the pink, and that areaway, which is the light pink. And you can see that the areaway kind of comes in and there's this gap between the church and the mission house. In our proposed, there's a few items to note here, is that our small vestibule where we have found the location that is as minimally invasive from the street. It's as far back as possible, but it's connecting both the church and the mission house. It is the way that is entered now, but more directly in our proposal. One of the things that we're also doing is, as we do these upgrades, the city funding and state funding actually requires a C of O for the mission house. And so our proximity are less than, at times, 3 feet, less than 4 feet between the church and the mission house has also driven some of the design choices and architectural elements that we've decided. And so here, what we've done is we've laid out some of these existing issues at the exterior. The orange line shows how we go through that pinch point. It's not visible. It's not clear where you go in. They kind of use these little cattle gates to make sure that you don't go in the wrong place. And there's hundreds and hundreds of people that come through here every single weekday. And then the blue line sort of represents one of the ways that the food comes into the mission house down into the cellar before it's food prep. And so you have to go through a sort of set of deteriorated stairs. There's height limit issues, and it's problematic on that issue. The interior flow, once you are past that pinch point, there's sort of a jerry-rigged ramp. Is also not ADA compliant, and this is also for the church, how you get into the church and sanctuary. And as you can see, people bring their carts in for the food pantry, and that circumventing is one of the problems that we're trying to solve. The second is when the soup kitchen is functioning, the access for the soup kitchen is up through the mission house, through the kitchen, through the volunteer section, and then back into the church in order to make it work. So our proposed improvements are basically trying to simplify everything so that as you access from the street into the church, it's really a visual and physical straight line. That's the number one orange line. And Two is bringing yourself into the vestibule. This vestibule, which is ADA compliant, we're grading up, so it's on grade into the church, but it also allows for access between the mission house and the church. The ADA access into the mission house, we are adding an elevator at the interior. We're making sure that the administrative programs and the community meeting rooms on the second floor are accessible. We're adding ADA toilets into the mission house, and that vestibule actually allows us to infill that space between the church and the mission house. And so we're adding an ADA toilet on the church level as well. And then the lower ramp is, we are proposing to have a lower ramp to the areaway, so it's just easier to get food and products and dollies and everything else into that cellar and back out. So this is just a list of the bulleted items that we are proposing, which turns into
the proposal. So as you can see here, this is the most fair comparison of the existing to the proposed. This is a sort of cleaned up image of that existing condition. And as we propose, you can see on the floor plan below, the same vestibule that Hilda was just highlighting. Architecturally, our goal is to create sort of the minimal character of an architectural sort of infill component here. The glass allows for the left wall of the church and the masonry to continue to wrap the inside corner. So you would actually be able to sort of identify the fact that the existing building is still there. And of course, we need to build this with materials. We've used a maximum amount of glazing, but at the same time, we're very cognizant of the fact that we need a durable set of doors and an appropriate sort of, we don't want to incur too many sensitive aspects to this. So the aluminum doors would allow for there to be pallets, because as Hilda was just mentioning, this is not only for people to come through here with their shopping cart, et cetera, to go in and collect their goods and go home. This is actually a pallet delivery system as well. This is the only way into the church. And so if you think about this as a sort of an industrial entry point, we think this is a pretty good way to indicate that that sort of traffic is there, but it obviously addresses the community's approach. The ramp that leads you to the upper elevation, as you can see somebody sort of bringing something up in the blue outfit there, is a higher by 3 risers, which takes us to that existing ground floor on the mission house. And of course, the behind that masonry wall that is just to the right of that is sort of a hidden from view, but as elegantly as we can, that's where the dumpsters would be kept. And so there's sort of 3 layers of circulation that we're addressing. There's the primary entrance on the left, the accessible ramp that takes you to the mission house in the center, and the sort of more service entrance. And you can see those 3 layers in the plan as well. So while maintaining a singular element as an entry point. And so that's sort of the complexity of what we were trying to do, is make a unified element that does provide that infill architecturally. Here is a sort of enlarged version of the floor plan. And you can see now in the details of this fairly small, humble addition, but it really tries to do a lot of things. The number 1 arrow gets you in through the main entrance and into the church, where we propose to have wooden doors with a small glass panel. Again, trying to deal with the character of that building and be sensitive to each of their different identifying materials. And number 2 is, if you access this through the ramp, you would then make a right-hand turn and enter the mission house. But the blue area would be one unified glass covered element. The left wall, as you can see in the space that I'm identifying here between the B and the A, would allow for us to actually have airspace. Physically, the separation between the 2 elements we have a sort of panel that's identified by C, so that if there's some leaves that happen to be blown into that area, et cetera, one can get to them. But really respecting the character of the actual church. There's this sort of stepped brick detail that will continue to travel through and around. So we're really trying to minimally touch the building. And the one thing that we do have to interact with, which you'll see on the next slide, is the stained glass window that you see in front of you, which is has to be bisected by the roof element. And we've architecturally treated that by these details, which we can go into a little bit more information about.
So the stained glass window that we would be modifying is separated by panels, and those 2 lower panels are what we would be removing. The masonry sill, the existing masonry sill would be carried up and become the new masonry sill. And so that the language of this opening is as it is in other locations of the church, which is a round arch window with the wooden doors below. What we are also doing is adding columns to this vestibule. So structurally, it's not being supported by the church. There will have to be flashing at the brick, but we are trying to be as minimally invasive to any of the brick that we're not modifying at this opening. And then it would be physically supported at the mission house side. A little bit more about the stained glass. So on the upper right is the exterior of the existing stained glass, and then you can see it at the interior. Those existing mullions are what is driving where we would make the removal. And as you can see, we have other indications at the interior. We've got a stained glass window with an arched top and a sill with the wood doors below. And another different type of opening with this is an arched top window with a wood. So that's what's happening at the stained glass. What we've also, in walking through and understanding what the C of O challenges are, where we have buildings that are now going to be separated, it's different C of O with less than 4 feet. We are putting as much HVAC as we can up on the roof. And one of the items that led us to modifying the building is that we need to have a 2-hour rating up the entire building. And our existing copper sloped roof, we cannot do that. We have to either modify that tremendously and lose interior square footage, or we were able to extend the line of the masonry, the existing line, and have that continue up. And what that also allows us to do is the low height of that parapet then hides the HVAC, which we're putting up on the roof. And we can, so this sort of gives an image of what we're trying to do and what we're able to do. There's a little step back. We've got that tall rectangle at the one side of the building, and it does step back. The masonry wall steps back. So we would be, our new masonry wall would be stepped back slightly. We have FDNY requirements for a 42-inch guard. All of these elements, where we can, we're putting that on the inside of the wall. But otherwise, we're following through with what the existing guard is and having that go around the entire building. For the window replacement, the existing windows are square top windows fitted into an arched opening. And what we're proposing is that we clean this up, and we do have aluminum windows in a double hung layout, but in order to get energy efficiency, we're having a fixed arch top, and the bottom is a single hung window. And then what we're proposing is that the square top window and the old wood frame that's covered with wood paneling would be removed. And then we would go back to the masonry with a new cleaned up window replacement. And so here, what we have is our section, which shows the new construction. So our building is in blue. The green is the elevator bulkhead, which, because we have a tall top floor, is not visible from the street, but we do have the HVAC, which falls in line of the visibility from very small sections of it. And so we have the mock-up on the right and the sort of existing conditions on the left. And it is minimally visible, but much of it is covered by that new parapet wall on the north. The railing that we have a very, very low parapet. It's about 8 inches high on 3 sides. So that is where the top mount, it's going to be a top mount railing, but where we can build a new parapet that's about 2 feet above by code, we can do a side mount railing, so it'll be almost invisible. And so these photos show on the left the existing condition, and then on the right is the mock-up. You can see the rail, and of course we couldn't get rid of that HVAC for the mock-up, so it's the railing kind of goes around that. And then the lower one, and just another view of what that is going to look like. And then to try to be even more clear, what we're showing on the left is the left and the middle are both from the sidewalk. So you see that black iron fence, and you could see the mock-up. And then from the rendering, which is on the inside of the fence, that wall, that parapet wall, which gets us our fire rating, which allows us to put our steel up on the roof, to put our HVAC, hides that railing and the HVAC. So it's everything that we're really trying to do is to be as minimal on the important elements that on the designation report is all about the church. The mission house really isn't mentioned, but we're still trying to be as delicate.
Correct. And in the center photograph, you can imagine, obviously the vantage points are quite different from the rendered view, but you would barely see the vestibule tucked in behind the fence, deep back in recess from the street. Here's some additional photographs that are prepared for the mock-up. During this time of the year, this photographs were recently taken. Obviously, it's obstructed by much of the large trees, which is nice, but during the winter, we still feel that there would be really no detrimental aspects to the environment or the context with all the benefits that all of the different proposals are providing the project. And then for reference, we do have some other photographs in case anybody was curious about how the cellar is being redesigned and the upper floors, as the functionality of the mission house is completely transformed, as you can see from the left photographs of the existing, the right of a well-designed commercial kitchen so they can do their work properly, ADA bathrooms that are non-existent. And on the upper floors, they have meeting rooms. You can see obviously on the right-hand side, the elevator. We found the most correct location, setting it away from the rubble wall, foundation wall, so that we wouldn't disturb or need to do any underpinning. But so that central area does work with that sort of central access point that would clean up the circulation. And that's also another reason why the vertical wall that, as Helda mentioned, that provides us a fire rating, actually does allow us to walk and not have to walk at a 45-degree angle down this main path. Thank you very much, and we welcome any comments or questions.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Goldblum.
Yeah. What is the vestibule made of besides glass? It's like a brownish material. I missed that?
Oh, yeah, actually on that one, we had we have an aluminum. We were taking from the church, the wood frame of the stained glass windows is sort of a light brown. So we were selecting a champagne colored storefront. But it is an aluminum storefront. We were going with a heavier duty door.
Right.
And so, yes, and that's champagne.
Yeah, I see it.
Sort of there. And then the materials at the interior, the regrading from the sidewalk to the church will be done with concrete, but the interior, the vestibule will sort of continue some of the lines of the control joints and be bluestone. So that it has.
And that sunshade is also the champagne metal with exposed kind of little brackets.
Correct. So it's a translucent part of that is we wanted to hide some of the flashing that is going to go on at the brick. And we also wanted to make it so that translucent enough that you could still see the stained glass, but also give a little bit of dignity to that entrance so that it feels a little bit of protection for those.
So that's the actual ceiling of the vestibule is the translucent or just that little sunshade thing?
No, the sunshade is the only translucent. The top of the vestibule is a solid.
Okay. And the reason for that, how big is that little gap between your vestibule and the church?
We estimate it to be about 12 inches.
12 inches. And is that there for a code reason or
no?
What's it there for?
So aesthetically, as you can see on the section at the top, that allows this one window to not be interrupted.
Understood.
And so the gap would allow for the stained glass window to receive as much natural light in the way it would today. And at the same time, it allows us to allow the stepped brick detail that wraps around to be separate. And we, in fact, don't need that space particularly. So that the interior glazing wall then would allow for you to enjoy the architecture of the exterior of the building.
So then the next question is why only 12 inches? Why not do more? So you could actually get in there when those leaves get in there and not have to just put a stick in or something.
No. We have actually purposely introduced a panel. That's a window panel that allows you to open it from the interior and you can actually access it very easily. Also, this vestibule, since it is very small, every square inch is actually important. So if you can imagine the double set of doors on the left and then in plan on the right, even the space for 2 or 3 people to have their carts or wait if it's raining, etc. So we felt that about that 12 inches is just enough to respectfully separate the buildings, provide a functionally cleanable area, if you will, for the leaves, et cetera. But at the same time, not to take away too much space, because as you can imagine, there could be 3 or 4 people here, and that allows just a little bit of wiggle room for that to work.
Last question, the spandrel brick infill. You showed a picture of another arched window that has had a similar proportion. Where is that located in the church relative to our window?
So the green one is
Yeah,
in plan inside in this
Yeah.
location. And then the pink one, that is literally one of the front doors that's to the right of the
Right.
central axis.
so your window is going to be more like B than like C, right?
Correct. And
So what's in the symmetrical position? Like if you're in the church and you're looking back towards the outside, are you going to see something weird where on the left side, you're going to see A and on the right side, you're going to see something very different?
Meaning when you're
If you're
looking
in the
outside of the
church, if you're
church.
standing at the altar looking out, looking west, are you going to see that the A side is different, noticeably different than the B side, than the opposite side?
I think we have a photograph, can't remember the interior photograph held up.
One of the things that actually blocks the view of one of our of everything on the north transept of the church is a massive organ. You actually can't see any of the stained glass on that side. It kind of peeks out over the top. So there's nothing symmetrical in those areas.
And Commissioner, the photograph on the top right, that's the door that we would be using.
Right.
To the right of this is where the stained glass went. Apologies that it's not there, but yeah.
Thanks, got it.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Chu.
Yeah, so the infill that's happening on the rectangular building, right, has no windows in the proposed. Is that brick to match? Because it is a motley facade, it seems like there's a lot of difference.
So there are sections.
Right.
At the east elevation and that corner that have not had sort of a thorough coat stucco added. And that's where we would do our brick match. It will not, we weren't looking to match the stucco or the thorough coat. We were going to match that brick. And that's why it does appear on this, so.
Photographs. The exterior.
Right, on the side, our rendering kind of represents what's there now. On the other side of the church, it doesn't have that stucco. So,
But there's quite a variety of patchwork, if you will.
yeah.
And so our goal was to, and you can see on the central photograph here, the top parapet is fairly new and doesn't have much fluorescence or any applied stucco. And then there's 2 or 3 different tones clearly here. And our goal was to mimic the ones that are closest to it along the top, so that it would be more of a blend as opposed to what you see now, which is a pretty dramatic difference.
And you didn't consider windows in that wall that you're adding?
Simply because of the fire rating.
Oh, you needed the rating, so it'd have to be rated windows.
Correct. It's about 4 feet away, and we are not wanting to add expense of those to the overall. So the we were keeping them as a fire rated separation.
One more question, and no reflection on your proposal. It's just there's a lot of fine surgery going on in here, so we're just trying to understand. The vestibule that's added between the 2 existing buildings, is the face of it flush with the mission house?
No, we were bringing it back so that the corner of we were bringing it back 4 inches, so that an entire in course of bricks is visible.
You get the return and then your storefront starts.
Correct. And the same is
Canopy
happening with the
forward.
church.
How far is the canopy project?
It actually varies.
Oh, it's not an angle.
It's slightly, and this is a sort of a geometrical issue that we had, which is that when you go up the ramp, you're actually getting closer and closer to the roof edge. And so what we're trying to do is create a condition where you prioritize the main entrance, which is the double door. And so the canopy is a little wider there, and there's a gesture to the fact that that is sort of the more dominant aspect of it. And when you ascend the ramp, you actually don't want a canopy that's going to be kind of meeting you at your head, since we are really keeping a lowest profile possible. But it just allowed us to still allow somebody who might be either entering during the rain to momentarily close their umbrella, et cetera, and not make it so harsh that you would just have the verticality of the facade of the new vestibule.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? All right. We don't think we have any other questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. And we do have one person who signed up who's present, Pamela Wolf.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am Pamela Wolf, President Emeritus of Save Chelsea. Save Chelsea has serious concerns about the current proposal. The Mission House copper mansard roof was clearly designed to lean away from the south transept roof edge to let natural light through its stunning rose window. Its entire purpose is to mitigate the impact of the Mission House on the church. The proposed replacement of the mansard with the vertical section of wall would virtually entomb the window, reducing its natural backlighting to a sliver in the summer months and zero in winter. Please note that in the entire application, there is not one photograph of the affected rose window. From the street, the Mission House would appear to crowd the church. Its new profile would diminish the legibility of the church's roof line by reducing its silhouette against the sky and appear uncomfortably close to the face of the roof overhang. When asked in his presentation to Community Board 4 why the elevator might not be positioned slightly farther south to avoid headroom problems at the mansard, the architect stated that cellar mechanical equipment prevented this. However, that equipment is in the new elevator machine room, which might be reconfigured or positioned on another side of the elevator. It appears that the machine room could even be moved farther south to occupy what is drawn as an empty cavity. The floor plans show considerable latitude for configuration to preserve the mansard. The building could be made more fire resistant by any number of means, including sprinklers, fire shutters at those windows, the application of fire rated interior sheetrock, or failing all else, fireproof reconstruction. Rather than treating the landmarked and sensitively shaped Mission House as a constraint, the architect appears to have designed from the start as if free to dispense with its mansard roof. It seems unfortunate to so boldly disregard the clear intent of the original architect to respect the south transept rose window. We are also concerned that the new accessible bathroom between the Mission House and church will wall up the lower portion of one of the church's original stained glass windows, partially removing its critical backlighting. There are no details to indicate how the now exterior side of this window would be accessed for maintenance, or how the roof over the bathroom area would intersect with the window in a waterproof connection. There is no indication of how the newly internalized stained glass window to its southeast, next to the wheelchair lift would be artificially backlit. No mention is made of the facing material of the quote community wall that separates the new accessible bathroom from the new vestibule, which will be prominently visible from the street through glazing as rendered in this presentation. This proposal needs substantial further development and resubmission. Thank you.
Right. Is there anyone else in the room who wishes to speak on this item? All right. Noting that there is not, I will turn it over to Gregory Kalla to take us through any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. I am looking through the attendees list now. I do not see any hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 4 recommends conditional approval, requesting that the applicant make every effort to protect all historic elements of the Mission building, most notably the original mansard roof, when making the proposed ADA modifications. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to ask if you'd like to respond to any of the comments we've heard.
I guess the only thing that we would add is that in locating the elevator, we did take an extensive amount of research to see what the most correct location would be to minimally disturb, as I mentioned earlier, the footings or the rubble walls of the perimeter. We traditionally try to put them off center, off of the perimeter to minimize that, and also find a key location that allowed us to keep the existing stairwell that's facing the west side of the mission house, and to make it a minimal connector vertically, since the idea is not to gut renovate the mission house, but to find sort of that ideal scenario where we can vertically put that rectangular shaft. So there was extensive locations, and if it were to shift in any direction, it actually has an impact on usability of the spaces. The kitchen downstairs would become 30% less usable. The headroom would forces us actually to, if we were to retain the mansard, we'd actually shift the elevator considerably to the south, and that would begin to put into question the functionality of other floors.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, not seeing any questions. Why don't we move to close the hearing and begin our discussion? Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion now on this proposal to address barrier-free access, accessibility, and circulation needs. It involves this new vestibule in the recessed current entry between the mission house and the church. Changes in the grade to accommodate the different uses and functions, and a modification of the stained glass window to insert a door beneath it, and then changes, as we've heard, of the mansard roof to allow for more mechanical equipment at the roof. So Vice Chair Bland, would you like to start this one?
You know, I'd like to hear others.
Okay.
I was confused a little bit by the testimony, and I couldn't follow all of it, and I would like to hear others because I was prepared to think this was a very elegant solution, but I want to hear others' points of view about the issues that were brought up in the.
Okay, all right, Commissioner Lutfi.
It's kind of complicated.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the applicants did a good job of explaining a very complicated situation. And, they're trying to not only improve ADA accessibility, but at the same time,
at the same time, improve like the flow of people and goods through the facility to the pantry. Then they're also creating a new entrance to the mission. And then they're, as part of that, they're, taking out part of a stained glass window, which it sounds like they're going to preserve. I think you're doing a very hard thing here. And and while you're doing it, you're trying to, sort of preserve the line of the mansard roof. And then there's this whole issue of, tell me if I'm getting everything, the rooftop, the bulkhead and the rooftop mechanicals, and you want to, make sure that they're not that visible. So I think that's everything. And I have to say, it sounds like you've done a pretty good job doing something very complicated. And, I'm not an architect, but, based on the little that I know, it sounds, and can glean from all of this, it sounds like you are improving the flow. There is the whole facility is going to function better, and the, entrances and exits are going to make more sense logically. And I think you did a good job on the rooftop. So I would say, and again, I defer to the architects here, that I think this is well done.
Yeah, and I think some of the other things that we can think about are the fact that this location is very recessed from the public way. I think it's also, because of that location, I think a little less noticeable. I think that, as the applicant said, they sort of tried to apply more deference to the main church building, which is really described in the designation report much more than the mission house. And although the mission house is where all of this programming happens, it's so critical to their mission. And so they're very light touch to the extent that they could, with the exception of the door, of course. But again, I think that's handled in a way that is consistent with other windows above doors around the church. And I think the mansard roof is also in another location that would be pretty minimally visible from the public way. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I think that these are issues that a lot of our older churches are facing, and I think it's great to do this. Accessibility is a big issue, and it's really hard because it wasn't thought about, and there's a lot of inaccessible buildings and spaces that we have in our historic buildings. So I think that the main proposal, there's several components here, that this is a great improvement to what they have now. I think it's a huge improvement. The dumpster, the whole experience is terrible. So it brings some front of house to an area that wasn't initially ever designed to do that. It's a tricky little problem, and you've got a budget to deal with. So I'm going to say this is acceptable, this piece right here. The only thing I would say, and I think everything you're doing is for great reasons, it helps their programming, helps them stay functional and efficient. I just don't understand the condition of the mansard at the rose window. I just don't quite get it. That's all. I think that the approach is minimal, and I don't have an issue with what's being proposed. I just don't understand that pinch. And is it really that tight to the window? Where
Larry may be able to answer.
Yeah, we just actually had the slide up there that showed it. I mean, the existing condition, the base of the mansard maybe even rises up to the height of the rose window or close to it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then it starts to tilt away, but it is a very tight condition. And this would extend the masonry upwards and fill in the void that's currently left by the mansard.
Right. Would the applicant be open to doing a condition right there that was a little more sensitive? Is that something that's...
I mean, I think the architect explained it would have repercussions to the placement of the elevator,
the corridor, all that stuff that's happening
program.
inside.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Master.
Yeah, I think that this is a very challenging project. I feel like the architects that worked on this were very careful and did a lot of research to try and make this, ADA accessible, and putting the HVAC system on. I understand the mansard roof. There was an issue with the fire rating as well. So I think that this was well thought out. And given the conditions that they were working with, I find this appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Halford-Smith.
Yes, I think this is a very well done application, solving a lot of different problems with some very, few key moves. I think the new entrance is quite elegant, actually, and would definitely improve the visitor experience and the experience of everyone has to deal with everything that's going on in the mission. I think the elevator placement looks logical to me and plan, and I've been thinking about this mansard roof and the rose window, and looking at their plan, it's the last page, 32. It seems to me that you could keep the mansard pitch in front of the rose window, sort of have the walls straight, flanking it, and then keep the pitch to allow more light into the into the rose window, and just maybe the bathroom might have a lower ceiling height. Those two rooms might have a kink in the ceiling or in the, in the wall, but that might achieve both things. And you can just do a simple fire rated construction just right there at the window. But I think otherwise, this is a very good solution to a very complex problem.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I think in general, it's very good in working to achieve the accessibility and better circulation. And I think the changes they made to do that are fine and very approvable. And taking one portion of the stained glass out, I don't think really is an issue for me. And the rooftop equipment is not going to call undue attention to itself. The roof slope change appears to be mostly necessary. I think Commissioner Holford-Smith's suggestion is interesting, and perhaps they could further examine that with the staff and see if it's possible to do that. But I think otherwise, in general, it's great. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree with everything so far that's been said. I think that Ann's right that they could get away with leaving the mansard in that one section or like replacing it with a rated mansard. They might also examine with staff facing the area that used to be mansard with the standing seam. It doesn't affect the rating and it might recall the historic condition a little bit better. I don't think it's a deal breaker either way. And it would also get rid of the problem of matching, picking a brick to match where you have 12 bricks that you're trying to match. I think the applicant should work with staff to make sure that the color of the anodized material used does in fact recall and feel good with the brown paint at the window trim. I know that champagne material. I think it runs a little bit lighter than what I remember from the church, what the pictures seem to show, but I can work with staff on that. I do worry about that 12-inch gap. I think it's going to be, I see they have access to it. I just think it's going to be a junk collector and it's going to look like hell in 5 minutes. But I would encourage them to consider making it a little bit bigger so that you could actually get a person in there with a mop or a squeegee to clean it out. I don't think 12 inches, which diminishes as the bricks step out, would really be sufficient to do that. I think they have to work carefully with staff on brick matching at the front facade where they're infilling the arch. I think that's has to be carefully done, or else it'll be a problem on the main facade of the building. But otherwise, I really think this church does amazing, important work and has done so for decades. And the fact that they've hired a more than competent firm to do a more than competent renovation that incorporates their needs while respecting the historic nature of the building is truly to their credit and completely consistent with their mission. So more power to them.
Thanks. Commissioner Ginsburg.
I agree. This is an elegant solution, a lot of pieces to make it work. And I think you can work with staff on the few things that are mentioned. I'd also want to compliment you of using this upgrade to make it handicapped accessible, to make the building more energy efficient, as well as all the other things you're doing.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I'm share the same sentiment for everything that all the commissioner have said. I want to compliment the applicant, the architects. Your AD accessibility is really well done. I do share the concern that Commissioner Chu and Michael Goldblum's concern with that gap, that 12-inch gap. I think that's a sticky area. I do not know what the solution is. I think but it's very, very well done and well thought of. And I was just in your location not too long ago, so I know the area.
Thank you. All right, Vice Chair Blau.
Now I can use everybody else's arrogance to say I agree, but really cheating, isn't it? But I wanted to also say how important the building is and how important the programming here is. Menard Lefevre, some say his greatest work is in Brooklyn Heights, St. Anne and the Holy Trinity Church. I've been involved since 1979 in trying to be sure that church never, and its incredible stained glass windows never leave this earth. It's not always easy. but a great architect, and Richard Upjohn also involved here, built Trinity Church. I mean, just the building itself is crucially important. So I support all of that. But then, as Michael Goldblum has just said, the programming here is generations long, generations important to the whole city. So that's why I sort of was nervous to go first, because I want to support this. I think this is a big leap forward in many different ways. But I was taken a little bit aback by some of the comments in the testimony, as I mentioned, and I wanted just to be sure that those important aspects that she brought up, now in my mind, it's settled that they are not unimportant, but that they are outweighed by the importance of what the applicant has so elegantly and creatively used to solve a really tricky problem. So I'm in support.
Great. Thank you. All right. So I think, we appreciate the sensitive approach here. And I think we have a lot of support for the church, for the mission, and for this creative solution to deal with these challenging issues. So I'll go ahead and make a motion, and I will add some of these suggestions as well at the end of the motion. So in the matter of docket number LPC 24-00588, 296 9th Avenue, Church of the Holy Apostles, an individual landmark. A church building designed by Menard Lefevre and built in 1846 to 1848, with an eastern extension built in 1853 to 1854, and transepts designed by Charles Babcock of Richard Upjohn and Son and built in 1858, and an attached parish mission house and connector block built in 1866 to 1867. This is an application to replace windows, modify window and door openings, and install barrier-free access ramps, construct a vestibule, modify roof lines, construct an elevator bulkhead, and install mechanical equipment. And I note that the designation report includes the mission house as part of the designated site, but does not include a description of that simply designed building. And I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the proposed work will be located in a discrete location within the areaway between the church and mission house and at a distance from the sidewalk, and will provide barrier-free access, enhance circulation, and create an accessible bathroom without impacting the primary facades. That the new foyer enclosure, featuring light bronze finished metal and glass window and door assemblies and a projecting glass canopy, will be modestly scaled and simply designed, and its details and finishes will not compete with the church or the mission house. That the removal of portions of one stained glass window will allow for the installation of a door, and two stained glass panels will be preserved, and relocated to another area within the building, and that the proposed alterations to the sloped roof line mission house in sections is necessary to meet fire code regulations, and the parapet will be rebuilt to match or relate with the building below. That the mission house elevator, bulkhead, and rooftop mechanical equipment will all be minimally visible from 9th Avenue, and the rooftop railing will be seen in conjunction with the simple unadorned roof line of the mission house, and therefore these installations will not detract from the mission house or the neighboring church building. That the proposed metal windows throughout the mission house will match the historic windows in terms of configuration, details, and finish, and that the change in material from wood to metal and the operation from double hung to single hung will not be perceptible from the street given the setback of the building on the site, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the individual landmark. However, this approval would be contingent upon the applicant working with the staff to supply samples of the brick and the aluminum finishes for staff review and approval. And we'll also ask the applicant to explore keeping a part of the mansard roof across from the nose window, and consider also exploring a standing seam metal on the wall, and that in consultation with the staff to determine whether that improves the appearance. And so with that, Vice Chair Blend, would you second that motion?
I certainly will happily second.
Okay, thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Please continue to work with the staff and good luck. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 10, LPC 24-02043. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 856, Lot 24. 51 Madison Avenue, the New York Life Insurance Company Building Individual Landmark. This is a neo-Gothic style skyscraper designed by Cass Gilbert and built in 1927 to 28. And the application is to install a through window louver.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Haverling. I'm architect. I've been working with New York Life, specifically New York Life Building, since about 2009. And this is the first time we're having to address this issue of having to put louvers into an existing opening. Even though there are existing louvers within the openings themselves, this is our first attempt at trying to get this approved with you all. I assume I can just hit enter.
Matt, if you'll click on the screen, then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys, your mouse.
Gotcha. Thank you. So a little bit of history about the building itself. It is located on the northeast corner of Madison Square Park. And as you can see, some of the historical views of the building itself, taken from the, I can't really see, 1935. The center photograph was basically a beautiful sort of panoramic view of the building from Madison Square Park. And as you can see, that's really the primary view for the postcard as well. The building, I believe architecture was sort of meant to be appreciated from this angle. We have here on the left a diagram of the sort of the enclosure of the streets around the building. The Madison Square Park in that illustration is on the bottom left, and the 27th Street is the north side of the building, and this is the subject area of going to be our discussion. In the next photograph on the right, you could see the outline in the little red square. That indicates the area where we are proposing to put the louvers on the north side of the building. Here are a couple of street views from the east side. You can see that the location is very minimally visible from the street. It is fairly high up on the building. It's from the 17th floor to the 20th floor. And as you can see, the windows are recessed, and so the openings are minimally visible. The close-up view is on the right. Similarly, from the west side, again, you have a slightly more direct view of the windows from the west side, but again, it is a relatively obscured view of the window openings. We have here just an example, just some photographs of the existing windows. They are bronze. They are original to the building. The dimensions vary in these windows. They range in size from about 5.5 feet wide to about 6 feet wide, depending on the location. And the height ranges from about 7.5 feet to about 10 feet, again, depending on the location. So they are actually fairly large windows on the facade, and as you could sort of see, the proportions of the framing itself is very slender. The great thing about these windows is that they still operate. They've been minimally maintained in a lot of cases, and the windows still operate almost freely, but by hand as you can move them up and down. So they're in great shape. The glass has obviously been replaced probably several times on probably most of the windows at some point because they've broken over the time. But the frames themselves and the sashes are in good condition.
So here's just an overview of the design of the original windows. You can see the head, the meeting rail, and sort of in the center panel, starting from the top, and then the sill, and then the jam conditions of the double hung windows. We're showing both upper and lower sash in one plane there. And then obviously you can see also the elevations of the windows themselves, interior and exterior. Very simple design. Really not too much in terms of their, in terms of complexity of the design itself. Here's a diagram showing the location of the louvers that we are proposing. There'll be 2 columns, as you can see noted in the building elevation on the north side, as I mentioned before. Some of the louvers will be 1/1 louver, and in other cases will be a louver over a glazed opening. The glazed opening would be original, obviously. If I could get into some of the details of how these louvers were designed, we tried to really impact the window as little as possible. And so what we are proposing to do is remove the glass and insert the louver into the rebate that would normally accept the glass. This is, you can see an example on the left. We have the louver over louver design fitting into the existing sash openings. And then on the right, you have the example of the louver over glazed opening. A couple more details here. Oh, I'm sorry. So in terms of how this actually is to be inserted is that we actually remove the interior stop from the glazing rebate, and the removal of the interior stop is simply done by unscrewing a bronze piece of trim, and that's done on 3 sides on the upper sash and 4 sides on the lower sash. They can unscrew very easily. We have done this as part of a restoration program on other windows. This was approved by LPC on other floors. And then the glass is easily removed at that point. The louver is inserted and then glazed in with new sealant. And that's essentially the entire process. To reverse it, we would just unscrew the stops again, put the louvers, take the louvers out, put the glass back in. So there's absolutely no impact on the sashes. There was no impact on the frames. And then that's basically it. So that's the design in a nutshell at this point. So,
Commissioner Goldblum.
So why did you choose to project the louvers forward as opposed to keeping them where the plane of the glass was?
So in order to actually be able to remove the stops, we have to have that clearance on the interior.
Okay.
Yeah. And if we were to project them towards the inside, there would be no way to unscrew the stop.
Okay. And they're made out of copper?
They are made of copper. The frame is made out of bronze. Bronze has a higher yield strength.
So the red part is bronze and the black part is copper?
Correct.
Thanks.
All right, Commissioner Ginsburg.
Simple question. Why do you need the louvers?
For that, I could introduce the project architect who was involved, Johanna, and she was involved in the programming of the spaces themselves, and she can address the questions.
Hello, everyone. So the floor plan itself is quite limited in square footage. So we've introduced the mechanical room on that side of the floor. It's the less deep portion of the floor, so it can accommodate that for program.
Okay, and can you just state your name for the record?
Oh, yes, of course. Johanna Devia with HLW.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Chu.
And for the detail on the right where there's a vision panel, that's also a mechanical room?
So that's above a restroom. The mechanical team needed additional fresh air intake for the mechanical system, and that's the reasoning for that.
Just out of curiosity, replacement windows, are they single pane glass or using? Yes.
They're single pane. Yes.
Okay, so the historic condition, no IGUs.
Yeah, we can't fit IGUs
into that assembly.
Into that section.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
All right, other questions? Okay, let's see if we have public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak on this item? All right, noting that there is no one in the room to speak on this item, I'll turn it over to Gregory to take us through any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one hand raised in the meeting for this item, that being Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. So Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. Given the importance of this building and the prominence of this facade, we find the proposed position of these louver units to be awkward and inappropriate. HDC notes that the applicant has shown louvered units arranged across a single horizontal band elsewhere on the facade, which we find to be a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I am looking at the attendees list now, and I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 5 recommends approval, and I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'd like to ask if you'd like to respond to the comments. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Sarah Ripple with Higgins Quays Barth and Partners. We're the preservation consultants on this project. Let me just go back to the elevation. So the mechanical that's being installed addresses ventilation on multiple floors. I believe that the location that were indicated in testimony was on the 26th floor, where that's kind of a single mechanical floor. So they were able to be arranged in that kind of configuration. The location on the north elevation was intentional, as if this building were to have a secondary elevation, this would be it. There are other louvers located on this building historically and pre-designation. And at the ground plane, there are loading bays and kind of drop-off locations that kind of designate this as the secondary elevation. Again, if there were to be one, given that the kind of primary and grandest perspective is from the park, from the south and southwest. So this location and this kind of consistent alignment at this location on the north elevation also kind of limits the visibility from up north. Once you start walking up the street, it kind of disappears behind the taller building directly across the street. So this was found to be the most sensitive and kind of minimal location needed for the mechanical ventilation. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, so let's close the hearing. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Thank you. And Commissioner Goldberg, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we are going to be reviewing this application for louvers in the north elevation of this building, this individual landmark. This is before us today, really because it's an individual landmark and it's on a primary facade, although it's as the applicant stated, sort of the less prominent facade as one experiences this building. And because the windows are of this bronze material and the applicants have presented how they're going to install this with minimal impact on those special windows. And then the plane of the louver, and the applicant has explained why it's not flush with the sash and how it works with the installation within these bronze sashes. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Hopwood-Smith, would you like to start this one?
Yes. I think this is a very elegant solution to this problem of modern mechanical systems needing more air than they used to. They probably always needed it, but now we know they need it. So I think it's a very simple solution to put this bronze frame into the glazing rebate with just a simple removal of an interior stop, and it's very removable. And I think on the north facade, it'll be pretty minimally visible, because I do think that when you're walking south, you do have much larger buildings, and when you're basically looking north, that's when you get the good view of the building. So I think it's well done and appropriate.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Master.
Oh, I don't have anything to add. I completely agree with Commissioner Holford-Smith.
Okay, great. Commissioner Chu.
I think this is an appropriate proposal, and I appreciate keeping the existing window frames in the detail.
Right. Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, I concur. I think it's appropriate. I think it's absolutely amazing that these window frames are still functioning. And it's I guess they just don't make them today the way they used to back then. Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah. Vice Chair Bland.
Just look at this application and tell me that if inserting a few louvers is going to interfere with our appreciation of this extraordinary building. It's very a minimal change for, as Commissioner Holford Smith said, a needed upgrade to the mechanical system. So it's appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Chen.
Not only that, I need more glasses to look up there to be able to see. And also the fact that symmetrical is reversible, and more importantly, can argue again additional ventilation for the bathrooms.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Appropriate and agree with other commissioners.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Agreed. I want them to make sure that staff should make sure that anytime anyone comes in for a replacement of windows, they should be shown this building. All right. And if anyone ever comes in to replace the windows of this building, it should never be permitted.
Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I agree. It's totally appropriate.
All right. So
can I just ask one question that has nothing to do with our approval, but with the changing laws like local law 97, where you can't really insert additional glass, how are you going to meet those new rules in terms of, sealing the envelope of the building?
Yeah, Commissioner Ginsburg.
I guess this is my department. The only solution would be to put interior storm acoustic windows, which are done all the time, which would give you the energy efficiency without affecting the outside. It would make it harder to open the window from the inside because you would in effect have two windows to open.
Right.
But that's really the only solution.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. That was just for my.
Places over
Well,
many,
yeah.
many years.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that's only for national register.
It's only for National Register. Okay. So I think we can make a motion to approve, Anne.
In the matter of LPC 24-02043, 51 Madison Avenue, New York Life Insurance Company Building, individual landmark. A neo-Gothic style skyscraper designed by Cass Gilbert and built in 1927, 1928. The application is to install through window louvers. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage or destroy any significant architectural features, that the installation involves removing only the glazing and retaining the window sash frame and is fully reversible, that the proposed through window louvers will be mounted almost flush with the plane of the window frame behind the brick mold, helping them to remain a discrete presence, that the proposed copper through window louvers will be located high above street level at the 17th through 20th floors at the setback front facade. Therefore, the difference in material from the bronze windows will not be readily discernible, and that the proposed copper through window louvers will patinate naturally to eventually approximate the patination of the bronze windows.
Right. Thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right. Mark?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. All right. And we'll move to the next item.
Next item is public hearing item number 11, LPC 24-01774. This is an application for a binding report. It's in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1111, lot 1, 1000 Fifth Avenue, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, individual and interior landmark. It's a Beaux-Arts and Roman style museum building designed in 1864 and 65 and designed by built in 1864 to 1965 and designed by Box and Mold, R.M. Hunt, McKim, and White, and others, with designated interior spaces, including an entrance vestibule, the Great Hall, a passageway corridors, the grand staircase, halls, balconies, and all vaults and domes above the halls and balconies, designed by Richard Morris Hunt and Richard Howland Hunt, with consulting architect George B. Post, and built in 1895 to 1902. The application is to install interior digital display screens.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Henry Miller from Beyer Blunder-Bell Architects, presenting on the proposed digital displays at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So just a little bit about the existing conditions, the history of the building, and specifically the Great Hall, where the displays are proposed. The Met obviously is a New York City landmark on the exterior in 1967, and an interior landmark in the Great Hall space and the stair, the grand stair, and the flanking spaces. This was landmarked in 1977, so you can see the extent of the landmark here. This is what's called Wing D. This was designed by Richard Morris Hunt and completed in 1902. It serves as the main entrance to the museum. And just zooming in then on the Great Hall, you can see the kind of symmetrical plan here. It's really a tripartite plan with 3 saucer domes with circular skylights above, and it provides entrance both to the west, to the north, and to the south to the collections, as well as serving for ticketing, for retail, adjacent functions, ticketing, retail, and coat check. And then there's the octagonal info desk right in the middle. We're probably familiar with that. Just a couple sections. You can see that the triple dome with the stone vaults. The interior is Indiana limestone, buff Indiana limestone with plaster, painted plaster as well. And we'll go into that a little bit. This is looking west towards the grand stair, and then sections looking both north and south. So you can see that it's a double height space. There's a balcony on the second floor, also part of the landmark. And you have colonnaded passages into what's the Greek and Roman on the south and the Egyptian wing, or Egyptian collection on the north. Just a few pictures here showing the kind of, change, the morphology of the use of the space. So originally when it opened in 1902, it was a gallery. There was actually sculpture in the space. And it was modified not too soon after it opened by McKim and White, who took over as the architect after Richard Morris Hunt passed away. They ended up designing the wings that flank this to the north and south on Fifth Avenue. You can see the function of the space starting to become less about display of artwork and more about circulation of the public. Some more additional historical photos here. Subtle changes over time with lighting, the use of the space. Significantly, I think in 1970 is when Kevin Roche, John Dinkerloo Architects renovated the Great Hall. That was as part of the museum's centennial. So you can see that at the time there was the terracotta colored paint was added into the arches, and some of the furnishings that were installed at the time, setting up that octagonal plan for those elements. And then finally, 2023. So you can see that the Great Hall is really transformed into a very busy public space. Huge crowds, a lot of people moving around in the space. And just a quick note about how visitor circulation works and the visitor experience. So the original the plan in 2012, but before we started looking at the digital displays,
there were these kind of kiosks, satellite kiosks, in front of these columns, the colonnaded entrances to the collections. Those have been removed. So I think that's actually a big improvement on the space. Those columns are now kind of disencumbered and able to, be seen in the space without impediments. One other thing we wanted to point out is a project we did adjacent to the landmark, interior landmark, which is the ticketing hall. So this is the in taking out those satellite desks, we were able to consolidate everything in this ticketing hall. You can see the displays here, which is something that the museum is starting to incorporate into their signage and wayfinding. Gives them a lot of flexibility. They can, change that for special exhibitions, for special events, etc. So the proposed design for these digital displays would be behind those fluted columns on the north and the south, really for visitors as they're entering into the collections. I think, one challenge of the Great Hall, because it does have these multiple entrances, is you need to be very conscientious about where you put the signage in so people know where they're going. An elevation now looking towards the screens, but through those piers would be the collections. So these signs are really a significant point where the visitor can understand, what are they going to see? What are the special exhibitions that are currently on display, as well as a map of the museum. There are currently static signs there, so these are replacing those with the added function. I think just also important to note here, these are plaster walls. So we're staying away from any of the stone. We're staying away from irreversible construction. We can talk about that a little bit here. So, just looking at the detail of the screens, I think this is a good example of, how the Met uses them. So you can see, for example, what's happening at the museum on a Friday. That can be updated weekly. You're not, needing to replace the physical signage. You don't need to add supplemental signage, which would just further clutter the space. So these are very efficient and flexible. Looking down at the detail there on the elevation, the mounts are screwed into the wall. The power was already in place. So this is a relatively minor construction, as well as being fully reversible. The repair there would be just plaster and paint. Looking at that in a little more context. So north and south is symmetrical. Looking now just at the temporary screens. So the museum was able to install digital screens under a temporary permit for a period of time. So they've been installed. I think they're working well for the museum. You can just also see how critical the signage is in the space. Some close-ups of that. We went through some efforts to make the installation as compact as possible and to keep them off the wall as minimal a dimension as possible. There's an ADA requirement for that we're conscious of, so we're sticking to that. You can see here the plaster. A couple more shots. And this is just the technical specifications about the screens, if we have any questions. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? No? Okay. Yes, Commissioner Chu.
There's no frame around it. It's just the screen as it is.
That's right.
Simple.
Yep, like a picture.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if we have any testimony. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, so I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to take us through any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a few hands raised for this item. The first we'll be hearing from is Nuha Ansari from the Friends of the Upper East Side. Nuha Ansari, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Chair Carroll, Honourable Commissioners, my name is Nuha Ansari and I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Friends Preservation Committee has no objections to the proposal to install 4 digital display boards in the Great Hall at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We commend the applicants on the sensitive design of the digital screens, which, with their relatively modest proportions and their placement in the passageways on the north and south sides of the hall, will not detract from the architectural grandeur or the visitor experience of visiting the Great Hall. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I am promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC has no specific objection to these signs, but we note that there is an accumulation of seemingly disparate signage in the Great Hall. We encourage LPC and the Met to investigate a more coherent approach to signage in the near future. Thank you.
So much for your testimony. I am looking at our attendees list. I do not see any hands raised, although I do have that John Graham from the Victorian Society. Yes, John Graham has his hand raised now. So John Graham, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. And if you could please unmute your line and state your name for the record, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. We aren't fans of LED signs in or on most historic buildings. Their intense brightness and often rapid motion are distracting and out of character with historic architecture. But our objections here go beyond this. The 4 proposed LED signs will add to and exacerbate an increasingly chaotic architectural interior filled with signs of various sizes, types, and colors. Add to them the modern kiosks, carts, podiums, banners, light projections, and so on. And the Great Hall is increasingly looking more like a transportation or market hall than the entry to a great museum. The Commission's designation report for the Great Hall interior states that its grandeur enriches the visitor's experience and is a fitting introduction to the works of art in the galleries beyond. The report continues, the grandeur of the museum structure and its magnificent interior spaces are a fitting complement to the greatness of the institution. LED screens, banners, signs, and all the other stuff added to the Great Hall in recent decades aren't, we feel, compatible with an architecture of grandeur. In fact, we feel the Great Hall is nearing a tipping point where its magnificent architecture, the reason for which it was designated, is being made increasingly illegible. We suggest that rather than approving the application to add 4 new signs, the Commission worked with the museum to review all of the signage and other additions in the Great Hall. The objective would be to reduce the quantity and intrusiveness of these features, thereby restoring the intended character and legibility of the historic architectural space and its details. The applicant's historic photos show that as late as 1992, there wasn't a single sign visible in the Great Hall. While today's crush of visitors may make a return to that condition impossible, we believe a more balanced approach that better protects the grandeur of the Great Hall is achievable. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I am looking through the attendees list. I do not see any further hands raised. So I will note for the record that we received letters of recommendation for approval from Manhattan Boards Community Board 7, 8, and 5, respectively. And I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'd like to ask if you'd like to respond to the comments. Been largely supportive, except there have been some comments about the cumulative effect of signage. Yeah.
Yes. I would just point out, I think it's important to note that the content on the displays will not be dynamic. It will be, essentially static, flipping occasionally between, events and so forth. I would not speak to the museum's plans for wayfinding. We do have representatives from the museum. I don't know if they could or would want to speak on that.
Sure, yes. Come up and just state your name and speak into the microphone.
Hi, I'm a little shorter than Henry. I'll just stand on my tippy toes. My name is Brett Guard. I'm the head of capital planning at the Met. And I think it's an important question that Mr. Graham asked. And I think it's something that we're always thinking about and always interested in having holistic signage at the museum. As you know, it's 4 city blocks. It's 21 separate buildings with 17 different curatorial departments, 45 departments total, right? So it's a challenging task to undertake. And so we do take it in small bites. And I think we would like to think about it holistically. The digital signage that we're proposing actually just replaces existing static signage. So we're not adding anything new to the cacophony that some might think is in the Great Hall. It's a one-to-one replacement that allows us to save paper, staff time, and allows us to tell our visitors what's happening on a daily or weekly basis, as opposed to printing pamphlets that go in maps. So that's our goal for this application. For longer discussions, we're always having them with landmarks as we manage change throughout the building. So I think it's something that we're always thinking about.
Okay. And I think you mentioned in the presentation that these are static images, not moving images, but the fact that you are able to change them so easily allows you to get more information in that could potentially also limit the number of signs needed for that information otherwise. Okay. All right, commissioners, any final questions? All right, let's move to close the hearing. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Thank you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. These are, as has been stated, signs that received actually a permit for temporary installations from the staff pursuant to our rules, and they've been there for some time. They also replaced pre-existing signs that were in this location, and they are in these sort of transverse passageways outside of the main hall, installed in plain plaster, which I think makes the installation a little bit less intrusive on the historic fabric. And so we'll have our discussion on that. Commissioner Chu, would you like to start this one?
Sure. So if you just look at the floor plan of the museum, it is immense and it's complicated and it's had many additions to it. So the initial design of that lobby, it is in fact a huge circulation zone as an entry lobby. So that's completely understood that those are the crazy dynamics you guys have to deal with. I do think that the digital proposed signs are relatively discreet, and I think they provide a lot of useful, accessible information for people who need to find their way. And it probably helps reduce a lot of the staffing needs that you would require otherwise. So I think this is totally minimal and appropriate.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Master.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very modest proposal. I mean, 4 digital signs in this great space, I think is very modest. It's reversible. And I think it replaces, I think, a paper sign that was there previously. So we're not adding anything to it. The fact that we can convey more information, I think, precludes additional need for signage and pamphlets. So I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree. I think the placement at the side sort of galleries is more discreet than having it in the main space. But, you know, it is a big, complicated museum space to navigate. So I think signage is required. And I think it's an appropriate location and I think it's fine.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I agree with John Graham's remark about, you know, the need to really look at the entire picture of signage, which obviously I'm sure the museum is on a regular basis, but it would be good at some point, you know, to have a discussion about that. I think these particular signs are an improvement and, you know, necessary. And I don't have any problem with approving them. It's a huge museum with a huge number of visitors that need to be directed to all sorts of things. And the real issue is probably establishing a hierarchy and a plan so that you don't have just a lot of different things going on, which you do now, but I do understand why, having gone there many times, most recently to the Manet Degas exhibit. So, which had its own complications as to access. Anyway, this is I think a good proposal for its purpose, and it should be approved.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
No disagreement. I think this museum is an international landmark and resource. We are very, very lucky to have it here. And I think John Graham actually hit the nail on the head when he said that it's really a transit center. It is. I mean, this room is really mass circulation on the scale of Grand Central at rush hour on Christmas Eve. It's every single day. So the needs of wayfinding, the needs of circulation and movement, and how to integrate that in a way that is acceptable to a landmarked interior is no small challenge. I think that these signs are modest, reasonable, properly placed, and I think that the museum's commitment to continue to explore how to improve things in an overall manner is laudable and should be supported by this commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So I realize I've been going to this building for almost 60 years. And when I first went, it may be a little hazy. I don't think you charged admission. There were no security checks. The building, the total museum was half, 2/3 of its current size. There was much less tourism. And it was sort of a sleepy, dusty place. And over the years, it's changed a lot. And as Stephen talked about this and Michael Goldblum, it is really a transportation center. It's very crowded. And this seems like a very good way to help people with wayfinding, which is very important for those who have not spent most of their life walking through the museum. And I think this is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
Well, and I've also spent a lot of my life in this museum, but even if you have, and if you're going to the museum for something specific, it's a big museum. And the first thing you have to figure out when you walk into that big space, I love the transit hall analogy, is, okay, where am I ultimately going? By the way, this has nothing to do with this, but I think it was great that you created this ticketing area off to the side instead of the way we used to queue up, which was kind of nuts. But it wasn't nuts because I think, as Mark said, and as we've discussed with so many cultural institutions, you have to grow and change and, rethink how you do things based on what is going on, like what you're doing, what your crowd looks like, what they're interested in. And what you have here, and you sort of have a whole tiering of signage that you need, whether or not you decide to make them more uniform, even if they have to, they're going to have to be different kinds of materials. Not every piece of signage is going to be, an electronic signage. You don't need to have that kind of consistency to say this is where you get your tickets or this is where your coat check is or whatever it is. But so I think I see this as very logical, and with the goal of trying to move people through this entry point as easily as possible and quickly as possible. And, I want to underscore this other point that you made, which is these electronic media signs are, I think you still need maps, by the way, but they are taking the place of being not only directionals, but telling people what else is going on in the museum that you would have to get a pamphlet for that ultimately goes in the garbage at some point, whether it's there or at home or on the street. And so if there are tours or whatever it is, I think it's a great way to streamline that whole process. So I have to commend you for that. And otherwise, they do seem you need the ease to be able to change them as those things change. And sometimes just schedules change on a daily, they do change on a daily basis, but that doesn't mean the main media pieces don't stay the same. And I think that's a great service to the people who come in. So this, I also want to say that the fact that, this is being hung on plaster walls where none of the stone is going to be negatively impacted is a very positive thing. It's reversible. So I can approve this and, keep thinking and, we look forward to, I look forward to seeing, more ideas and as things evolve.
Great. Thank you. All right. So I think we have a consensus. Commissioner Chu, would you make the motion?
So moved. Oh, sorry. We're not voting yet. Okay, so in the case of LPC, yeah, same one. We're done. 2401774, 1000 Fifth Avenue, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Individual and Interior Landmark, Block 1111, Lot 1, a Beaux-Arts and Roman style museum building built in 1864 to 1965 and designed by Vaux and Mold, R.M. Hunt, McKim, and White, and others, with designated interior spaces including an entrance, vestibule, the Great Hall, a passageway, corridors, the grand staircase, halls, balconies, and all vaults and domes above these halls and balconies, designed by Richard Morris Hunt and Richard Howland Hunt, with consulting architect George B. Post, and built in 1895 to 1902. Application is to install interior digital display screens. Sorry. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage, eliminate, or conceal any significant features of the interior landmark, that the digital display screens will be installed at plain plaster wall cladding, utilizing a minimum number of necessary penetrations, and is fully reversible, that the screens will be similar in size to static poster box type displays formerly found at these locations and will not overwhelm the space, that the screens will feature rotating static imagery and will not call undue attention to itself, that the location of the screens, which will be at the transverse passageways outside the main space of the Great Hall, will minimize their visual impact, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the interior landmark.
Thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin. Aye. Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. Thanks. We'll move to our public meeting agenda now. Okay.
Okay, we're going to just do our one public meeting item. It'll be the last item of the day. It's public meeting item number 1, LPC 22-06302, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 632, Lot 30, 131 Charles Street, the 131 Charles Street House Individual Landmark. This is a federal style row house built in 1834 with a back house. The application is constructed dormer and rear yard addition. alter facades, eliminate a passageway, and excavate the cellar and rear yard. This was last presented at the public meeting of August 15th, 2023, and no action was taken at that time. The applicants will be presenting their revisions to the proposal after we open the proceedings.
Hello again, commissioners.
Hold on one second.
sorry.
Yeah. Sarah, do you want to open the proceedings?
Yes. Forgive me, Commissioner Holfer Smith, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the applicants may speak.
Hello again, commissioners and landmark staff. Thank you for hearing this application today. My name is Jackie Purdue-Vallon, preservation consultant on this project. I'm here today with the architects, Wayne Tourette and James Sasakorn of the Tourette Collaborative, as well as Valerie Campbell of Kramer Levin. Okay. As Corey said, this project is 131 Charles Street, an 1834 Federal row house with a back house that was built as a stable in the 1880s. It's an individual landmark and located within the Greenwich Village Historic District extension. The house is located on the north side of Charles Street between Greenwich and Washington Streets. Here are existing condition photos going left to right of the front facade, the rear facade, and the front facade of the back house. This application was first presented to you on January 10th and again on August 15th. We're going to provide a little more background in this presentation than is typical at a public meeting because four current commissioners were either not on the commission or were absent at that first presentation back in January, and because there were 8 commissioners present when we showed this in August at the public meeting. Here are axonometric views of the house looking west. The one on the left is the previous view shown in August, and on the right is the current view. The application is for altering the horsewalk, constructing a rear addition at the cellar level, creating a light well behind the addition, excavating to connect the two houses below grade from under the addition to under the back house, installing a dormer at the rear of the main house's roof, and alterations at the back house. Since this application was first presented, the scope of work has been much reduced in response to commissioner concerns. In particular, please note that the scope of work for excavation has been reduced so that now some of it is in conformance with staff level review for excavation. Here, comparing the axons, you can see that the width of the light well has been reduced so that more of the courtyard remains unaltered. Here's the east view. Here are the east view axons. You can see that the overall goal of the latest revision is to quiet and simplify the proposed proportion of the rear facade. Painted wood siding is proposed at the rear addition rather than the unfinished wood rain screen previously proposed. Glass railings are proposed instead of metal railings to reduce the visual intrusion into the courtyard. The dormer formerly proposed has been replaced with a studio window, a type of traditional canted skylight form that was historically used on buildings in this district in the early 20th century, and which we think better relates to the context of the district and to the history of this house, having once been the home of an artist, Diane Arbus, who lived in the back house for a number of years. Now, unchanged from the August 15th presentation, the proposal includes retaining a portion of the horsewalk at the front of the house, creating a storage area at the front of the building. However, rather than a new solid plank door at the horsewalk, as was proposed in August, which you see in the middle elevation, we're now proposing to install an open metal gate. The metal gate would allow a view going back almost 6 feet into the horsewalk with a false door at the rear of the storage area to still give the impression that more of the passage continues beyond it. This alteration is identical to one that was recently approved last month at 338 West 12th Street, a proposal that included removing the horsewalk and retaining a 3-foot portion of it visible through a gate. We'll refer to this particular approval again later in this presentation. The inspiration for the gate proposed today is this 1940s tax photo on the right, and the plank door shown in the 1928 photo on the left is the inspiration for the false door proposed for inside the horse walk. Looking at what this horse walk enclosure would look like in more detail, on the left is the existing door. In the middle is the plank door shown in August, and on the right is the current elevation showing the proposed gate with a false door beyond. And on the far right is a rendering of the view that would be afforded into the horse walk by that gate. Again, it's our feeling that the false door set almost 6 feet behind the gate would create the experience of looking into the horse walk and having the sense of a continuing passage, much more so than the existing solid door allows. At the rear, a false door would still be installed at the horse walk opening, memorializing the horse walk, much the same way as the commissioners instructed the applicants at 338 West 12th Street to do so. As stated earlier, the addition would now be clad in painted wood siding, and glass railings would be used to reduce the amount of visual intrusion. At the roof is the proposed studio window, which would face north and would be sided with wood clapboard like the dormers at the front of the house. We acknowledge that a change in dormer style was not specifically recommended or asked for. However, it was clear in the last meeting that there was little support for the gabled shed dormer form. We believe that a studio window is a form that is more typical to the district, and it is an elegant way to make the top floor of the house usable. Here are photos of the existing conditions at the rear of the house again. This was mentioned in our first hearing, but we'd like to emphasize it here briefly, that the rear of the house does have a history of alteration. The 1895 Sanborn map shows that there was once a 2-story wood addition at the back of this house. A scar on the house at the second floor looks like there had once been a doorway to access the second floor of this addition. And it's likely that this addition would have been sided with a traditional type of wood siding, like shiplap or clapboard. On the right is a rendered view that of that addition that the architects developed. It's an educated guess based on what clues we have. Here are some photos documenting the historic presence of wood siding on buildings and back buildings and rear additions within the district, and the presence of wood siding on houses today, for example, 77 Bedford and 17 Grove Street. And so the materials proposed here are painted wood siding at the addition and at the sides of the studio window, stucco at the lower courtyard walls, and black paint at the straps and hardware of the proposed plank door at the horse walk. Here are the existing and proposed cellar plans. And here are the existing and proposed first floor plans, which you can where you can compare the dimensions at the light well and the untouched courtyard area. In August, we proposed a light well that was over 17 foot wide with an at-grade rear yard that was almost 13 foot wide. In response to commissioner concerns about these proportions, you can see that on the right that the light well has been reduced to 11 foot 5 inches wide, which is really the minimum width to accommodate the stair going down into it. And the untouched portion of the courtyard has been increased to a width of over 18 foot 7 inches. Here is the existing building section looking east. This is the same section as shown in August. And here's the current proposed building section, where you can see that the depth of excavation has been reduced to about 9 foot 10 inches below the footings of the back house. Here's the proposed west view section that we showed in August. And here's the current proposed building section, where you can compare the width of the light well to the at-grade portion of the courtyard. Again, the width of the light well is proposed at 11 foot 5 inches, and the width of the at-grade portion would be 18 foot 7 inches. We'd like you to compare the proposed light well to the one that the commission approved at 61 Bank Street in 2008. Here, the light wall was also installed in a courtyard between a front house and a back house. The light well approved was approximately 24-foot wide and 15 feet deep. And a similar condition was approved at the rear of 31 Charlton, where a 7'6" light well was approved. Returning to 61 Bank Street, here are elevation and plan drawings approved in 2008, showing the alteration of the horse walk at this house. It was altered to accommodate a stairway leading down into the excavated rear yard, and the horse walk opening at the rear was lowered, leaving its original lintel in place on the facade. In this photo, you can see the view afforded into the horse walk at 61 Bank when the door is open. It's a view of the underside of a stairway. And this is 83 Horatio, which is another example of a horse walk being incorporated into the interior of the house in conjunction with the construction of a rear addition. And this is 338 West 12th Street again, which was just approved last month, as I earlier stated. Earlier in this presentation, I showed you the photo of its horse walk gate and the storage area approved behind it, where most of the horse walk became part of a new interior floor plan. As you will recall, the proposal was to incorporate the horse walk into the interior of the house in conjunction with the construction of a rear addition. Here's the August 15th and current rendering of the rear facade of the main house. You can see the reduction in width of the light well, the use of glass railings to provide more of an unobstructed view of the courtyard space, and the new proposed studio window. Here are the existing and proposed roof plans. In the middle is the plan of the previous dormer, and on the right is the plan of the proposed studio window. Interestingly, this blueprint from 1941 shows that at one time, a dormer at the rear of this roof was being seriously considered. In 1941, the house was being converted from a one-family dwelling into a two-family, and this plumbing section was filed with DOB as part of that work. It's not surprising that a dormer was considered during that renovation, as studio windows had become a popular addition on houses in the district in the early 20th century, as the area became an enclave for artists. Here are some recent photos of existing studio windows in the village. At 48 West 10th Street, a federal house. That's the one all the way on the right. It's interesting to me that they actually installed the studio windows directly onto the sloped roof. In recent years, there have been a number of commission level approvals for studio window additions within the district. Going left to right here is 44 Horatio Street, approved in 2015, 65 Horatio, approved in 2020, and 327 West 4th Street, approved in 2017. Here are some examples of studio windows which will face over the rear facade. These are 78-18 Charles Street, approved in May, and 43 Barrow Street, approved last month. Turning our attention to the back house, which was originally built as a stable, the previous proposed elevation is in the middle and the current proposed elevation is on the right. You can see the depth of excavation has been reduced and the recreation of the hayloft shutters has been eliminated. In August, one commissioner expressed concern that the original 1889 drawing did not accurately reflect the as-built conditions at that time, and asked that staff confirm that there was evidence of a hayloft window. Staff did conduct a site visit and did see the scar left on the facade from the original hayloft opening. Okay. However, in response to commissioner concerns, the design now only incorporates what we can confirm from evidence on the facade, the formerly larger window opening, but not the wood shutters. There's no evidence on the facade currently that there were wood shutters. So what you're seeing here is the previous rendering of the back house and the current proposed on the right. I think the current rendering best expresses the change at the courtyard, and that there's considerably more undisturbed yard being left in front of the back house, and so retaining that connection between the two houses. To conclude, we think the overall changes shown today respond to Commissioner's direction that the changes at the rear be quieted down so that the courtyard can read as a simple, unadorned space as it is today. We think the proposed addition and reduced light well are consistent with other additions and light wells approved elsewhere in the district, and that the proposed studio window will be more consistent with the history of additions in this district and less prominent when standing in the courtyard because of its canted angle. That's it for our presentation. We look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioners. Do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
The examples you've given with the horse loft of other ones we've approved, were the stable buildings still existing in those? Because as I remember the last discussion, that was part of our discussion.
I can only think of one that I was able to find, and believe me, I have combed through records of back houses and houses with horse walks. And that is what was approved at 61 Bank Street. So I'm just trying to get there. The one that was approved last month in 12th Street, that building had lost its stable. But this house, it's at 61 Bank Street, had a former stable building. Here you can see it in section.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, I'm not sure that we characterized that as a stable building at the time. It looked more like a residential back house, and we called it a corridor, not a horse walk when that was being reviewed. I'm not sure it's apples to apples. That's my recollection of the project from.
Okay. I'm not positive now, but I do remember looking at historic maps for this and thinking to myself that this building in back of 61 Bank started as a stable and then was changed, was added on to later, but I'm not sure now.
Okay. All right. Yes, Commissioner Goldblum.
I just ask Mark or Corey to just restate something that was said a few weeks ago when we were talking about horse walks in terms of our opinion as a commission as to their governability status as an architectural element in a historic building.
Well, I think the analogy that I have used, it's sort of like a recessed vestibule or something like that, so that where, to the extent that we have that you can walk through it and go all the way through into the back, these are exterior walls that, to the extent that they're gates and they go all the way through. These are exterior walls of the building, and we can have jurisdiction over them. And where they've been closed off in the front and the back, then they're really kind of interior spaces at that point. But where they currently exist as passageways through all the way, that we've taken jurisdiction over.
So does a door count as closing off? Or is a door on a horse walk?
In the past, so like the one example, I can't remember the exact the address, but in that case, they'd actually put a wall up, it looked like. They close it off the wall in that case.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Other questions? Okay, so let's move to our discussion then. And so this application this is the third time it's coming to us, and it has changed a lot since its first iteration. I think the last time we saw this, we did have much discussion about the horse walk, and many commissioners, I think, were comfortable with an approach that kept the first 6 feet. But there was discussion at the back that grade change really changed the relationship of that false door to the back house. And we wanted to see more continuity there, in addition to just concerns about the overall grade change and the cumulative effect of changes in the rear. We also had, and I will say other commissioners did feel that the horse walk should be kept in its entirety, but those who supported it did feel that a setback would be appropriate, but really concerned about the relationship of the false door to the back house in terms of the grade changes. We had concerns about the dormer at the rear, which was originally presented as a shed dormer, and then came back in response to comments with a shed dormer that sort of looked like 2 dormers with a flat piece in between. I think we still felt that was architecturally out of character. And so the applicants are now proposing a studio window, a different type of addition that is typical in the district on buildings of this type. And then as we've also seen, there are changes and reductions in the amount of work on the front facade of the back house in response to our comments last time. So there've been a number of changes here, and we'll have a discussion on those. Commissioner Chapin, I think last time you were comfortable with the approach for the horse walk with the setting back the 6 feet and that treatment.
Yeah, I'm mainly concerned about the horse walk as a feature that can be perceived from outside rather than, preserving the entire walk. That's my sense that the public, because the interior is not individually landmarked, to me, the ability to understand, perceive there was a horse walk there by seeing the entrance and front or back is more important than preservation of the entire walk inside. And I think that, this approach, which we have approved before, of trying to show there is a walk there by using the gate is an interesting and reasonable way to do it, actually. Though I actually didn't have a problem with the idea of a door, that is similar to a door that might have been there in the past. I also think that the change in the dormer is, I think, to a skylight type of approach. It's quieter and calling less attention to itself, and I think is skylights are a feature of the village, and I think that that's an appropriate way to go. I like the fact that there is more level space showing a connection between the primary house and the back house. I think that's important, and that the light wells really reduced. And as far as the shutters in the back, that's also, I think, a good direction there, just to minimize to reflect as much as possible the sort of apertures of the original rear building there on the top. So, I think all of these changes are positive ones from my point of view. And, I also was concerned about excavation because of the number of, accidental or demolitions that have happened for a variety of reasons. They have not all, there've been a variety of reasons that there have been accidental demolitions of older buildings in the village, and all of them unfortunate, but very different causes. But excavation is something that always has some risk. So I'm glad that they are reducing the amount of excavation as well. So for all of those reasons, I feel that this is more approvable and can support it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I do just want to also note for the record that we did receive letters expressing concerns from HDC, Village Preservation, Victorian Society of New York, and New York Landmarks Conservancy, and 2 individuals, which were made available to the commissioners in advance of today's public meeting. But I did want to note that. All right, Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the applicant for unfixing the back facade of the existing building, and for sticking with the facts that we can determine on the back building facade. I think I agree that the artist's skylight is more appropriate, but I think that needs to be a bit narrower. I think I would suggest that they take off at least one light on either side, so that the original profile of the historic roof is more prominent. And in thinking about the horse walk, and think about how Mark framed it. it really kind of, I think for myself, the policy that I would try to hold to over time, if I could remember it and hold on to it, is that I think it's okay to have it integrated into the body of a house, but I think it should remain legible. And if it is an exterior feature that is under the aegis of our review, then I think that it makes me think of it like part of the front or the back facade and not like, an interior. And with that in mind, what I would, and I think that this design and this project could easily conform with that notion, which is that I think that the essential elements of the horsewalk that should be preserved in some measure are the party wall or the lot line wall, the interior exterior wall to some degree, and and the fact that you can see from front to back. I think that's kind of the key to what this is. And I think that could be accomplished here by having the bathroom wall on, or this kind of room wall, which is basically in the same location as the exterior, that to be a retained piece of wall. I think that a portion of the inner outer wall should be retained. And I think that you could have the stair, but by having some kind of visibility from front to back, such that you could, if you open that gate or had a window inside there, you could experience this as a through element instead of a place to keep a bike or a garden hose, which is what this front closet will become. I think that captures the spirit of a governable, a covered exterior element a little better while allowing it to be integrated into the body of the building. I think having glass on front and back would be okay for me. But I think that the notion of seeing through material, some material on both sides, I think those are kind of what makes it a horsewalk and not a closet.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg.
Thank you. In general, I agree with Commissioner Holford Smith that this is significantly responded to the issues we've raised. And the one thing I find somewhat hard is the horsewalk and whether you could see light through it, because that would clearly be better from a preservation perspective. At the same time, I'm weighing, I'll be curious what the rest of the commissioners say. I can probably approve it as is, but I would much rather see it where you could see light at the end of the tunnel, as it were.
Okay, Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I can see that the commission is struggling with this horsewalk, and not to throw a monkey wrench into this whole discussion, but to me is a little bit of what Michael Goldblum says. I think the front is the research, they did a fine job of it. I think on the interior, being these buildings are very narrow, that some form of vestige of that it tells future generation that there was a horsewalk here might be one of the approaches. I love to hear what the rest of the commissioners think, but it's very hard to keep a clear sight, basically preserving it forever, this long corridor, but it is part of preservation. So really it depends on what the commissioners feel.
Okay. Right. And I think, we did just recently approve this exact approach at another property. So, and some others that were shown in the presentation. So that's something to keep in mind. And if we want to differentiate it, explain why. Vice Chair Bland.
I acknowledge also significant improvements. in the scheme that we're looking at compared to earlier schemes. I don't need to, I think everything here is fine. The life of me, I can't figure out why anybody would ever want to get rid of a horse walk, particularly if you have a house in the back. Everything that ever happens now here is going to come through what? The living room of the front? I don't know how that's a good thing, but I can't I mean, I think the issue is before us has been resolved in a way that I can accept it. But boy, if this were my house, I wouldn't get rid of that horse walk. Everything that happens in the back of my yard comes through, my neighbor's garden apartment. I don't know why they don't like it, but anyway, that's your choice. What's still troubling me, I'm not sure it's separating me from being able to vote for approval, is kind of the intangible of when is too much. And this, this poor little, wonderful little federal house here, or what is it, Greek Revival? I forgot the date exactly, but it's being dug out so much under it all. I'm assuming that this is the same height as
current grade.
The current grade.
Yeah.
So that helps a lot, but nonetheless, I mean, all of this undermining and digging around underneath it all seems a bit much. I'm just saying that to get it off my chest. I'm not sure I'd vote against it because of that, but it worries the heck out of me. As Diana said earlier, we've had many collapses and things happen, in particular in this part of town, because of just this. And as much as we approve it here, it has to be done in a way with engineers and contractors who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Apparently not all do.
And I just to comment on that, this application is being reviewed both by our own engineer as well as the forensic unit at the Department of Buildings. So we would have multiple eyes on it. And the recent examples in the village were not related to commission approved work. One was we had approved foundation repair at 14 Gay Street, and the contractor did something contrary to the repair drawings, but we hadn't approved excavation for occupiable use in that application. It was simply repair work, and they neglected the drawings. Similarly at 14th Street and 9th Avenue, those were pre-existing conditions not related to the approval of this work. They were doing some minor finish removals and discovered the cracks and reported it as required to the Department of Buildings and to LPC. So, but nonetheless, any excavation with building of this age does pose some potential risks, and we would have multiple eyes on it and monitoring it throughout the process.
I mean, to some extent, I just still stuck with the idea that if the owner needed this, plus everything under here, maybe they bought the wrong house. So I don't know. It's very frustrating. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I don't know where I'm going to vote, but
okay. Cumulative effect.
But I'm not happy.
Okay.
Sarah, does anyone know the answer to the question? Were horse walks originally always open, or did they have doors because of inclement weather or something? Because now a lot of them in the village.
A lot of them have doors.
Yeah, I won't pretend to know definitively, but I think our working knowledge is that they were open potentially with gates at the very earliest stages, but certainly did get doors, including solid doors early on as well. Even into the 1800s, still there were doors being put in, certainly documented in the 40s tax photographs with solid doors on some of them, but originally maybe open or with a gate.
You don't want the horses to escape, do you?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you.
All right. Commissioner Lutfi.
Okay, I'm just going to make a few comments. I think I have less of a problem with the idea that the horse walk, not going straight through. Does, in a way, it does go straight through, but it does go through the house, and it does. Ends at the back.
I think this recess in the front works well. This isn't such a wide house. I'm a little sympathetic to incorporating that space into the house so that it's usable. So that works for me. And I think the passageway out here is, a great gesture as well. I do think the two buildings, the rear of the front building and the front of the rear building have been simplified in a way that I think they speak to each other a little better. And they're, they just work better together. It's funny because, Michael, it's funny because this particular the studio window does have 4 windows in it. I just noticed that, and it does seem to work. So I'm open on that, actually. I have to agree with Fred about this excavation. I just don't get it. And I mean, assuming that it works from an engineering standpoint, we have an engineer and so does DOB, but this is like I don't know, it's not that big. So I'm trying to figure out what the real purpose is here. It's like 13 feet by 7 feet. It seems just like a big ditch. And I don't know. I'm not in love with it. If the rest of the commission members are okay with it, I could go along with it. But I happen to also agree that this house has been added on to and may not need all of that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu.
Thanks. I'm not going to talk anymore about the foundations because I think we've made that. We also know that there's neighbors that need to maybe be underpinned as well. So it's even further complicated. So of the proposal, I think I'll just talk to the separate points. For the horse walk, I think in terms of what we have as a commission have ruled in the past, I would accept this as a recessed exterior effect. I like Diane, I would have probably felt okay with the door too, because I don't know if I want to see a gate with the garbage behind it and whatnot. I also noticed in the drawings that there is an oval window that was bricked in, and is it proposed to be restoring it too? I would just ask that maybe they look at the light fixture with staff. I wasn't quite sure that location and aesthetic was that appropriate, the light under the window. In terms of the studio window, I think it's an improvement over the previous proposal, which seemed more just an attempt to replicate a historic style. This is something that's been done and been approved in the past. I do feel, I would agree with Michael's comment about the width of it, though I would reduce it a little. I think that even if I look at the front facade, the window placement is minimized in width and come closer, so it makes everything above a different hierarchy than what's below. And I feel like this one extrudes that straight up another floor. And I would like this to decrease a little bit as a hat on the existing structure. I do think this is a dark little hole here, but I will say in response to the previous comments made that it does flip the proportion of what was excavated to what's containing the existing grade. So in that sense, I would say it was an improvement because the previous proposal excavated more of the existing grade than what was left. Again, it's a tricky little space, but I'm looking more at the improvement to what's left at the grade level. It is a lot of basement plan with not a lot of light. So it's a lot of effort. It is a lot of cost and effort for that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Master.
I love the model.
All right.
So I know this is the third time around for you guys, and I want to commend you for coming back and adjusting your design based on the feedback. And I think that you've done a great job in being very responsive. It sounds like there's only two real issues that are outstanding, and one is the horse walk, and the second is the studio window dormer. I'm fine with the studio window dormer as is. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I'm okay with it. Yeah. In terms of the horse walk, I also agree with Commissioner Chapin that the most important thing is to retain the view from the street. And if you have that open gate and you have that 6 feet of depth, I think that you can create that visual effect of the open horse walk. And I think that's sufficient. So I can find this appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hopper Smith.
I think I'm glad I went last because I'm the complete outlier. Fred started to say it. I think when is too much, too much. And I think this is too much. It's a very early federal building. It's a very early landmark. It's a rare building with a rare back building. I think the horse walk should stay. I think most of it should stay as is, no excavation. I think if you wanted, as Fred said, that square footage, you bought the wrong property. This is an individual landmark. So I can't approve this.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I know, Fred, you had concerns about the excavation, but I think we might be able to move toward a vote if you can get comfortable with it. Or not. Otherwise, we won't vote today. I mean, I think it's sort of the.
I really am not, and not to put it back to Anne's shoulders.
Yeah.
But she reinforced my own thinking too.
Okay. All right. So I think where we are is I think we actually sort of came to 6 on the horse walk. But I think that in that same mix, there is some concern about the amount of excavation. So I think we will take no action if you can think about the excavation and the sort of cumulative effect of the work on this house a little bit more. We'll have you come back, and while we do have 6 on the horse walk, if you want to think about some of the other suggestions and explore those, that might be worthwhile as well. So.
It's possible to be, I think, good to clarify about the studio window at the top.
I think we have 6 for the studio window, although I do think that a little bit narrower, and that can be worked out with staff. Okay. All right. So I think the remaining issue is really the excavation in order to get a vote from those present today. But it's worth exploring the horse walk a little bit more as well. Okay. So we'll take no action, and we'll see you when you're ready. And I want to thank everybody for participating today. Thank you all for holding down the fort when Stephen and I were out this morning. And thank you, Vice Chair Bland, for leading it so expertly.